Good evening, everyone. Welcome for another episode in Adventures of Comprehension. I'm super excited to be here again. It's a Wednesday night, 8:30, which means I'm here with all of you. I'm really enjoying 2020 so far, and I hope you are as well. So if you are tuning in for your first time, my name is Sierra Harris. I am the author over at Adventures of Room 129, soon to be Sierra Harris Teaching. Super excited for my new website to be done here in the next few weeks, and I can debut that and show that to all of you, and I cannot wait. So I'm Sierra Harris from Sierra Harris Teaching. It's going to kind of take some time to get used to, but that's all right. And every Wednesday night, I come to you live at 8:30 on right here on Facebook to talk about all things comprehension. So if you didn't know this, I have tons of comprehension videos that you can go back through. All you have to do is head to my Facebook page, which you're there now. And then go on the left-hand side and click videos, and you will find all of my videos ready to go. So you can go watch any Facebook Live replay you want at any time. You don't have to catch me live. If you can't, that's perfectly fine. They're all there and saved and ready for you. So, anyways, tonight we're going to be talking about one specific reading skill that I know teachers sometimes hate teaching. And students on the other side too, they sometimes hate learning this because it's not black and white for us and for them, and that makes it difficult. And so hopefully some information that I've got for you tonight is going to help kind of give you some unique angles and attempt to teach this in a more productive way. So what are we working on tonight? Well, it's right here. We are focusing on 5 unique mini lessons that you can use to teach making inferences. So don't worry about taking notes tonight unless you absolutely want to. I am going to drop a link for all of these mini lessons all written out for you in the description and in the comments as soon as I am finished with the video. So stay tuned to the end. That way you can grab that link or you can come back and grab it later. Either one, it's fine with me. So if you have not already done so, I want to make sure I'm not just talking to myself out there. Hello, hi, please drop me a comment below. Let me know your name, where you're from, what grade do you teach. And let's see, what fun question can I ask you tonight? Let's go with, what is your favorite reading skill to teach? I would really have to think about that for myself. I've got so many that I absolutely love teaching. So maybe I'll noodle on that during the video and I'll let you know by the end. Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking, like I said, about 5 mini lessons for making inferences. And I do have them all typed out for you, and I'll give you the link here in a little bit. So we're going to walk through each one, and I'm going to talk you through exactly what I would do. And then, like I said, you can grab the link at the very end and download this. That way you can put it away. And when you come to teaching making inferences, or if you have a small group that you need to focus on, you've got some unique ideas that maybe you haven't tried yet, and maybe we'll get those students to be able to understand what making inferences is all about. All right. So first off, why is inferencing so hard for students? Well, one, it's something that they do naturally already, but they don't recognize when they do it. We don't always recognize when we do it. We make inferences every day in our lives based on ways we communicate with others, when we're watching television shows and when they're watching cartoons. When we're reading our own books for pleasure, we make inferences everywhere all the time. And no one out there is stopping and saying, you just made an inference. You just made an inference. Ooh, where did you get evidence? How did you know that? What schema did you have? Like, it doesn't happen. So when you do something naturally and then you stop and have to learn about what you were doing, it's kind of a backwards process. So it's difficult for students to kind of see this, right? It's also difficult because students are young. They don't have a lot of schema like adults do. So in schema, absolutely impacts a student's ability to make an inference. And that will come up in one of our mini lessons today as well that we're going to talk about. So if they don't have the schema, then they're not going to be able to make the inference as quickly as, say you and I would be having lots more schema than they do. So, inferencing is difficult. I get it. So let's dive in real quick and let's go over these mini lessons because I don't want to talk your ear off tonight, but I want to make sure you walk away with a sound understanding of each one of these, and hopefully you can take one or two or all five of them, whichever, and use them in your classroom when you're ready to. Okay, so mini lesson number 1, the objective is I can explain why schema is so important for making inferences. This one's always fun to do because you get to put kind of an adult spin on inferences. So what you're going to do is prior to the lesson, you are going to come up with maybe 5 or 6 different scenarios in which students will have no schema for. I try to think of adult things, like they don't know what mortgage is. That's my go-to example. They have no clue what a mortgage is. So I can write out a simple sentence or two, and I can then ask my students a question, and they're not going to be able to answer it. And it's going to be because they don't have the schema to be able to make the inference. For example, I could write out a simple sentence such as, Dad got the mortgage statement in the mail. He grabbed his checkbook. Okay, so there's two kind of big clues here. He grabbed his checkbook, so we know we're going to pay something probably, right? So they may be able to grab that. They may be able to get that part. But he got the mortgage statement. That means nothing to them. So they may be able to get as far as he's paying a bill, he's paying something. And nowadays, too, checkbooks are so not what they used to be, right? Very few people still write checks. So that may even be a stretch for them to be able to do. So right there is a great example of if you don't have schema, you're not going to be able to understand and make the inference. So all you're going to do for this mini lesson is come up with 5 or 6 very short sentences, or like 2 sentences per examples like that mortgage example. And you are going to ask a very basic question. What was Dad about to do? Very simple. And see those students struggle. You want them to struggle. And it's perfectly fine if they don't get the answer and you have to give it to them. Because the conversation you want to have with your students during this mini lesson is, this is why our schema is so important. If you are not constantly accessing your schema when you read, you're not going to be able to pick up on the inferences the author wants you to make in the text. Okay? So when you come to a portion of a text that maybe is confusing to you and you're trying to think through it, your background knowledge has to be something you think through. And you may or may not have background knowledge for whatever is in the text, and that's okay. If you still have a question about it, ask yourself a question in your mind and keep reading, and maybe you'll get to a point where you can answer that question. The point of it is that you're actively thinking about that text and that your brain is on and ready to make inferences when the time comes in the story. All right? So that is what you would do for mini lesson number 1. I would have maybe out a chart, and I would have my sentences written out, sentence 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I would have my students maybe even write in post-it notes if you want to make it more interactive to see what range of answers. And it's kind of funny when they give you the answers, but what range of answers do they give you? Post those, go through them, and then talk about what schema they were lacking. And just kind of see all of this information and see what's happening there, okay? All right, so mini lesson number 2 is I can determine the difference between literal and inferential information. And I'm looking down because I'm trying to make sure I go in the order that they're on here, so just so you know. All right, so the difference between literal and inferential information. This is something that we're all guilty of. When we go to teach making inferences, inferences are kind of one side of the picture. Inferential information is one side of the circle. We've got to make sure we show and teach our students the other side so they see the difference. And the other side is literal information, meaning straight from the text. I did not have to think, really. The author gave me these words. It's right there. Boom. I can put my finger on it. The thing about this is when we teach both sides, students can really see the difference of clearly I made an inference here because I can't touch the answer in the text. I can touch a clue, but that's a clue. And I've done this lesson a lot of times. Even your higher students will touch what they think is the answer when in fact it's a clue to an inference that they made. And so this mini lesson might take 2, 3, 4 times to try to do, whole class, small group, whatever you need to really get it to sink in for all of your students. So basically, here's what I would do in this lesson. I would have a text prepared, maybe a picture book, a mentor text, something like that. Bring all my students down in front. And beforehand, I will have picked out probably 10 different spots that I want to stop. 5 of them will be inferential or inferences that I've made in the text. 5 of them will be things that happen exactly in the text. Maybe I can write those down on index cards if I want to make it more like visual other than just the story itself, and I can post them on like a T-chart. I can label the T-chart literal and inferential. So then, as I'm reading, I will stop at that point and I will give the students the index card and I will read it with them. And I will say, is this statement an inferential statement or a literal statement? And we will have to look at that text to figure it out. Can I put my finger on the answer, or is there a clue that leads me to the answer which really came from my brain? So they can touch the text or they can touch their brain, and then you can sort the cards accordingly. It's a great mini lesson, and again, you may have to do it a few times because this really gets your students to think kind of about the whole picture of thinking rather than just focusing on inferences. So I highly recommend that mini lesson. So mini lesson number 3, we're going to just kind of breeze through these guys. The objective would be I can make inferences from observations made from a photograph. All right. I love using photographs. If you haven't picked up on this, a lot of my building comprehension units that are behind me, right there, a lot of them incorporate photographs in different ways. So making inferences from photographs is a fantastic way to really get students to see and practice inferencing, especially without having to read a text. So this is great for your, earlier in the week, maybe if you are just now getting into your making inference unit. If you have students who struggle reading, this is a great way for them to practice making inferences and really get to understand that, the text plus schema equals inference kind of formula and all of that without having that added stressor of having to read and comprehend a story. So here's what I would do for this mini lesson. I would go on Google prior to the lesson and find anywhere from 6 to 8 different photographs of people doing random things, such as swimming, shopping, talking, playing a board game, hiking, whatever. Find random Google images, download those and print them out, and then one at a time, I would post it in front of my students for them to see. Put it under your document camera, bring all the students to the floor and hold it up, whatever it works best for you. But let your students really look and analyze that photo. Then on the front board, you are going to create a T-chart. On the T-chart, you're going to label one side observations, and on the other side, you're going to label it inferences. So the first thing I would have my students do is go through and write out all of the observations that we can about that photograph. Now, they're going to make a lot of observations, so you may need to kind of pre-think through the inferences you really want them to make from that photograph and kind of limit their observations to the ones that you know are going to lead to inferences. Maybe not all of them, but make sure you're not, coming up with a list of 20, 30 things and then you make 5 inferences. You know what I'm saying? So really think through what inferences you want them to make from the photographs kind of before you do the activity. So let your students make all these observations that they can from the photograph and then have them focus on what inferences can they make based off this photograph, okay? So maybe they observe that there are flowers. I see flowers. They can then infer that it's spring or summer. Very, very simple observation, but that led me to an inference, okay? It shows students that even though I see one thing, I can get more information out of that one thing. I can dig deeper. I can go past what the photograph is showing me, meaning I can go past the words that the authors are telling me when I'm reading a story. And so make sure after you do this activity, and I would repeat the same thing, erase your T-chart, repeat with a new photograph. But I would make sure to take time and have the discussion with your students about, okay, how can I transfer all of this great learning to when I'm reading a story? What does this mean? Where's the text evidence? Where did my schema come from? What kind of thinking did I do today that's going to help me read later? So take time for that really meaningful discussion at the end of your lesson, because that really is just as important as the lesson itself. Okay? All right, breezing through, we're on mini lesson number 4. And remember, guys, I'm going to be giving you this paper at the end. I'm going to link it up in the description, and I'll put it down in the comments. That way there's 2 places for it. That way you can grab all the different mini lesson ideas for making inferences. So if you're taking notes or if you're just joining, don't worry, I've got you covered. Make sure to stay tuned at the end and click that link, and then you'll be able to get that, all right? Okay, so mini lesson number 4 is what we're on, and the objective is I can determine whether evidence given supports an inference. Okay, a lot of times when students make an inference, the actual inference itself comes easy. What students struggle with is finding text evidence that actually supports the inference. So it kind of goes back to students' inabilities to find text evidence to answer questions when they're working on a comprehension activity, right? Same kind of thing. We want to make sure that when students make an inference, whether it's correct or incorrect, whatever, are they finding the correct text evidence that supports the inference made? So, what would I do in this mini lesson? Here's what I would do. I would find myself a text, and prior to the lesson, I will have gone through and find anywhere from like 6 to 8 maybe opportunities where I've made an inference. Make sure they're all inferential opportunities, not literal. And then what I would do is I would write out on an index card, not the inference. The inference is going to be verbal in this situation. I would write out the text evidence that I would use to support my inference. I would make half of those text evidence correct, meaning it really does support my inference, and then make the other half incorrect. And so then what I would do with my students is as I'm reading, I know where I'm stopping, and I would stop at that point, and I would out loud, I would make an inference. I can see here that the author is telling me blah, blah, blah. I can infer that da, 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 da. You know, verbally make your inference. This is a great time to model correct inferencing. The point, though, is now you're going to turn to your students and say, here is the text evidence that I found that I can use to support and prove my inference. Then this is where your discussion happens. Is this text evidence actually supporting my inference? So talk with your students about how this is my schema, this is the text evidence, whether it's right or wrong, and then this is my inference. Do they all connect? Does this piece of text evidence actually support the thinking that I have about this part of the text? And you're going to find very quickly that your students can very easily see that it does and does not. So you can sort your cards if you want to, or you can write on the card or whatever you want, but have those cards ready, and then all of your cards that are incorrect on that page, have your students go back and find the right text evidence. Well, if this would be incorrect, then what on this page does support the inference that I just made? Have them find that sentence or that phrase or whatever it may be, and you can rewrite it, whatever you choose to do. However interactive you want to make that mini lesson is fine. You can make those tweaks. But just make sure that strong conversation is happening about correct and incorrect evidence, all right? So I love that mini lesson. Okay, last one of the night, mini lesson number 5. This is a great one, and I highly, highly, highly encourage you to try something like this for all of your reading strategies that you're teaching. It's great to try every strategy in reverse and try having your students write using said strategy. Okay, not only is it going to improve your students' writing skills, but it's going to give your students the kind of a perspective from the author's point of view when it comes to I am writing inferential information. I am writing where my reader who's going to read my writing is going to make an inference based off of what I just wrote. So you can make it super sweet and super easy as far as a mini lesson goes. And I highly encourage you to focus on something like character traits or feelings for a mini lesson like this. So what I would do in the mini lesson, I'd pull my students forward and I create an anchor chart. On the left-hand side of my anchor chart, I would have the students help me brainstorm a list of feelings that characters could have or a list of traits that characters could have. Um, and then for each one, what I would do is, of course, I would model first, but I would show my students how I can become the author and I can write out sentences that show this trait or feeling without being literal. So, for example, very simple, if a character is sad, what could the author write to show me that the character was sad? So the character walked slowly, he moped, he was crying. You could go on and on and on. So have the students practice kind of that reversal inferencing, and then you can even make this interactive where you give every student a different trait or a different feeling, and then they have to swap with different partners, and their partner has to try to make the inference to figure out, what trait or feeling did you have? This is the correct evidence. Am I right? And it's just a really fun way to practice the writing skills, but get that skill practice in reverse and really let students see what it takes to be an author who writes inferential information for their readers. So that would be mini lesson number 5. All right, friends. So I just threw at you 5 different mini lessons that you can use to teach making inferences. I truly hope that at least one of them is something that you haven't tried before. Um, and I highly recommend grabbing the freebie that I'm going to link here in just a second, as soon as I say goodbye, up in the comments, or down in the comments, or up in the description, either one, same link. Go and grab that. That way you have this for future reference, and you can utilize some of these great mini lessons to really help hone in your students' abilities on making inferences. Because I've been there. I know it takes a lot of time and effort to really get all of your students to the point where they can naturally make inferences when they read. So you are not alone. No, it is not, an uphill battle that you're not going to be able to ever, get there. You're going to get there. Your students are going to get there. Just keep going. Just keep going. All right. So I'm going to go link the paper, and I hope you can all join me next week. Again, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday. I'll see you here for another episode in Adventures of Comprehension. So stay tuned until then, and I'll see you all later. Bye, friends.